Hey everyone, welcome to Femme Totale, where for about 10 minutes I delve into the ins and outs of women and their identity in today's culture. Today I'm going to be talking about a big subject. I'm going to be talking about hypersexualization of women and misogyny in the music industry. Now, keep in mind that this topic is way too deep to summarize in 10 minutes, so at the end of this podcast, I'll include some ways you can continue deeper into this subject if you find it particularly interesting. Feel free to reach out to me also if you have any questions or want to talk about this subject. I'm always willing to delve deeper into these topics than I can in these podcasts. So put your earbuds in, get going on whatever you're doing. If you're driving, settle in. If you're sitting down and listening, relax and let's talk about this. So over the past 1,000 of years, women have worn many hats. They've been gatherers, hunters, caregivers. They've been teachers and mothers. They've been activists and leaders. And over the past hundreds of years, there has been a large shift in culture and the acceptance of women outside of these past roles that they were kind of tied into. Women have taken on the roles that were traditionally only reserved for men. And I think we can all agree that the feminist movement, no matter what your opinion on feminism is, has brought about a healthy change in our culture. Women have also played an increasingly big role in the music culture, in the music industry. There are several women who kind of kick-started this music industry and paved the way for other women to rise. They walked so that other women could run, if you've ever heard that saying. Early on in the music industry, people like Sister Rosetta Tharpe and Mahalia Jackson were some of the first women to gain popularity in the music industry. They did great things for music and the civil rights movement as well. And if you were to look forward from there to women like Missy Elliott, who today still plays a big role in our culture, they have encouraged so many others to step forward into the light and share their talent and have made a place where women can share their voice or maybe even just listen to a voice that makes their own feel heard when they can't speak up. Looking into cultural effects on music and sexuality in music can be pretty difficult. Many people refuse to believe or even accept that music plays a role in gender typing and sexualization. When they do talk about misogyny, the most commonly discussed genres of music are hip-hop, rap, and metal music. While I believe this is important to consider, it really is only surface level. There is so much more going on behind the scenes in this music industry that's better worth our thoughts and time. So I want to introduce you to this book, Feminine Endings, Music, Gender, and Sexuality. It was written by a musicologist named Susan McClary, and she takes on this very large subject, largely untalked about subject of musical constructions of gender and sexuality in traditional and classical music. Before I read her book, I had never even considered the role that gender construction played in music outside of genres like rap and hip-hop. In her book, she describes how music from every period reflects the society it was written in. And she asserts that gender organization and the roles traditionally adopted and negotiated by culture have been actively displayed as long as music has been around. When she applies this idea to sexuality, she talks about how constructed the idea of sexuality seems to be in music, especially how it conforms to that binary male and female. One of the ways she explains this is with the male and female tonics in music, where one of the tonics is much more strong and kind of like macho, while the other one takes a quote-unquote weaker tone. So even in classical, just music without words, there are still these constructions of gender that are displayed there. And in pieces of music that explicitly share personal experiences with sexuality, they give listeners a way to describe, define, or construct some of their personal experiences with sexuality. And this kind of makes a pathway in people's minds for how they want to display sexuality, kind of like a mental framework, I guess you could call it that. And this affects culture because of the framework. It's how people learn that they can think about how they feel, I guess. So all in all, what does this mean? Generally, this means that there has been a subliminal bias, you could call it misogyny, in music, that stems from music and is displayed by music. And where does this come from? Well, we should assume that music plays two main roles in society. It is a way of expression for artists to share their cultural worldview, and it shapes listeners' view of the world based on what they hear. When we look at it this way, music that displays excessive aggression and hypersexualization can be thought of in terms of like a chicken and an egg. Which came first, the culture or the music? We don't really know, but what we do know is that it's affecting people, and can display this in a study. Lots of studies on this, but one study I found conducted by Rodgers and Hust showed that adolescents who internalize gender stereotypes and believe in the objectification of women and the portrayal of men as sexually aggressive were at a significantly higher risk of experiencing and perpetrating physical and non-physical harassment. So this is saying that, like, when we internalize music that we're listening to, we will unintentionally place ourselves in situations where we are victims maybe of harassment, or even perpetrating it, starting it, I think that's so sad. Like, when we study the role that music plays in people's sensitivity to crimes like harassment or assault, listening to those pro-equality songs increased empathy for victims of sexual harassment and correlated with more positive attitudes towards women. So this means that like pro-equality is music that doesn't denote a specific sexuality or kind of raise up another type, like empowering specific things. So kind of just like both groups are of the same level, we're one. That's pro-equality. And while a study conducted by Greitemeyer, Hollingdale, and Traut-Mattausch did find that participants who listened to this pro-equality music felt more empathy for a victim of assault, there were no significant variations in the way that the participants believed the assaulter should have been penalized. So even though these clinical studies are important and it's good to know the facts, above all else, what I'm saying is that what we listen to matters. If we listen to music that glorifies one group over the other, we will implicitly imitate this behavior. If we listen to music that puts us into groups specifically, we're going to imitate that behavior and look for those groups ourselves. And if we take a big aerial look at this issue where music glorifies the heterosexual male and pushes down women and people who don't align with the heterosexual view, one way we can remove this prejudice is by exposure to music that is pro-equality. And we'll talk about that later. But for now, I want to move on to talking about some examples in media today where women have received specific backlash for quote-unquote exploiting their sexuality for profit. One famous rapper has received quite a bit of hate for her music. I think most of you would know her. Her name's Cardi B. She has been in the spotlight for several years for her skills as a rapper. She's pretty impressive, honestly. But also she's been in the spotlight because of the explicit content that is in her music. One of her most famous songs, called WAP, caused an uproar in the media. The song is just as sexually explicit as any other rap song, but still, instead of the focus being on the empowerment of male genitalia, the focus is on the empowerment of female genitalia. And this just caused a whole lot of issues in our culture in general when it was released. And she stated in an Instagram video that the reason she exploits her sexuality is because that it's what it seems like people want to hear. She also mentions, like, that's what sells, And there's much less support for rappers who are women who don't release this vulgar music, or quote-unquote vulgar, I guess. It depends on how you look at it. And Cardi B isn't the only one who thinks this. An article posted by Brenna Michener on a website called Alice questioned entertainment industries. She questioned whether they're empowering women to own their sexuality, or are they exploiting them for profit? It seems that just like in times when classical music reigns supreme, men and women are simply expressing the culture they're placed into. But this kind of puts women in a tough spot yet again. They're either too weak to go beyond the misogynistic culture, and they're kind of, filling in that role where they're aligning with it and submitting themselves to objectification, or they are just too strong-willed and too manly or not interesting enough, and the culture as a whole rejects like the artistry that they're displaying. Besides facing the idea of blatant misogyny, there are also many layers of creating and producing music that artists must think of. They have to consider what they want to make, what the producers are wishing for them to do, what the labels will accept, what will sell, what will make them profit. Like, we have to think, like, even though this is music and this is art, like, this is also people's way of living, Like, they can't just make music for free. It takes time and effort. There are so many issues to face in the music industry. It can be kind of overwhelming, and there's not enough time in this podcast to talk about it. And I know if you're anything like me, you're thinking, well, okay, what in the world am I supposed to do with all this information? And I'm assuming that most of you aren't music producing billionaires. If you are, shoot me a text. I would love to talk to you. But if you're not, there are a few things I would recommend that anyone can take part in. The first is to seek and support women in the music industry who deserve more attention in the media for their work. I want to encourage people to give some of these artists a listen and to expand from there. Just like find something that works for you. I'm sure that there are so many untapped singers and songwriters and rappers and whatever you listen to, it's out there for you. And there are women who are creating it, So go explore that. If you don't know where to start, at the bottom of this page, there should be a link or two to some female artists in the music industry who I believe deserve some more credit for their work. And if you enjoy music, I'm sure you will be able to find some new artists you can jam to at home, on your commute, or even shopping at the grocery store, whatever. It might seem small, but supporting artists like this who are putting themselves out there despite all the undescribed biases in the industry, it can make a huge impact for them. And a second recommendation I would make on what you can do about this issue is kind of like what you're doing right now. Educate yourself, listen to podcasts, read articles, and follow advocates on social media who purposefully strive to educate our world on the impact of misogyny and how music media plays a role. When people say knowledge is power, they really mean it. I really mean it. So being knowledgeable on a big subject like this might be the best thing you could do to combat the small-scale ideations that stem from it. All right, to wrap things up, thank you so much, guys, for listening to this podcast, and I hope you can leave feeling like you thought from a new perspective. As always, I will see you next time on Femme Totale.